Hello, Windermere Union Church. My name is Pastor Brad Jagger, and I am your new senior pastor. Very excited to get started with everything in the church life and trying to help this church be as vital and incredible as it already is, but just taking us to the next level. And we do have a lot of things to do ahead of us. So, what I decided to do, I know a lot of people are wondering, what's this new guy have in store? What's this plan? I do have a master plan. I do have ideas that we can do that to grow the church and to bring vital ministries to the church, build relationships within the church. There's a lot that we can do. So I know it brings anxiety to a lot of people to like what changes are coming. Like when he says he has a plan, what does he mean by that? So I know that brings anxiety. So I want to do these videos and I'm going to upload a weekly video, and each time it's going to be a different topic. So I figured I'd start out with the topic of church growth. So when we're talking about growing the church, what do we mean by that? Some people are looking at the mega churches down the road and thinking, well, we don't want to be a mega church. So what do we mean by church growth? So we're going to specifically look at the numbers. A lot of my ministry, not all of it, but a lot of my ministry is kind of like Moneyball. I think of the movie Moneyball, that there are tried and true stats and statistics and looking at the numbers that, the data, the truth is in the data, and it's going to reveal what we mean by growth. And I'll explain all that in a second. That's what the video is all about. So let's get into talking about the numbers. But before we talk about where we want to grow or where it's possible for us to grow, we need to look backwards and look at our history of attendance. And that's what I really look for, is I look at attendance more than I look at overall church membership, because that's really, you can have a church membership of 1,000 people and only 50 people in the chair. So, you really need to have a focus on what is your worship attendance. So with that, I got my trusty computer right here, so you can't see it on the screen, but I'm going to have it over here. I'm going to have everything I projected up here for you, but I'm working off my computer to my right here. But anyways, a church attendance. So this is your church attendance according to the church profile that was presented to me as your new church pastor in the search process. And all of this data, your church gathered from the information you turned in to the conference over the past 10 years, because you report your attendance and your deaths and your confirmations and all these little facts and figures. So that's where these stats come from. So over the past 10 years, we can see that 10 years ago, or it'd be more than 10 years ago if we're going back to 2011, but from when this chart was made, 10 years ago, 2011, we're looking at an attendance of 102. Now, that's an average attendance. Obviously, Easter is going to be a little bit more. And the Sunday after Easter, when everyone paid their dues and stopped showing up to church, is going to be a little bit less. So, you have fluctuations in attendance, but when you take the entire year, the average attendance in 2011 was 102 people. You go all the way down to 2021, really 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, they're all 105. Is that a true number? I'm going to guess not. You were in COVID there. How are you counting people in their couches? And it's a little suspicious that the number is exactly 105 in 2018, in 2019, in 2020, in 2021. So at some point in time, we really didn't know what was going on, and we just started reporting the same old numbers we reported before. So we have those numbers. But if we look at those numbers, and we look all the way back to 2011, we can see that in a 10-year span of time, the church has only seen a net growth of 3 people in worship. Now, we see some fluctuations between then, and we'll talk about that. But between 2011 and 2021, we only have a net gain of 3 people. Now you throw in there the realistic numbers of COVID and looking around and seeing that we're worshiping in the 70s and the 80s. Hopefully we can pop up into the 90s fairly quickly, but still that's far below any average that we've had in more than 10 years. So we got some work to do, but I wanted to make sure that we had an understanding of the history. Let's do a little deeper dive into the history. Your greatest attendance since 2011 was in 2012. So just a little more than 10 years ago. We're looking at an attendance of 120. That's an average attendance for the whole year. So if we were to look at this 120 as a benchmark, if we got to 121, just 121, that church growth right there would put us at the highest worship attendance in the past 11, 12, 13 years, depending on when we hit that benchmark. So right there, when we're talking about church growth, there's our first benchmark. Can we get to 121? And that would be our greatest number in more than a decade. So there's one number. A little deeper dive. Okay, we went down here. I already talked about how the fictitious numbers of COVID. And so we need to kind of take those with a grain of salt. We all, I think, realize what happened there, and we understand our situation and where we're starting from right here. And then your glory days from that 120 to the next few years, those were your best attendance in this little, 5-year period. But even at that, you're, 109 to 120. Over the more than a decade, that's been your best. That's been the highest worship attendance. So these are just the facts and in numbers. Numbers don't lie, and until you get to the COVID years, and then we've kind of fudged the numbers, but you know what I mean. We need to be honest with where we came from. So this is where we came from. One of the things I said is I've been having these Zoom meetings with a lot of the church committees as I've been onboarding onto the church. So I said, one of the things I was most excited to do at the church is count parking spaces. And it seems like a weird thing for a minister to want to do. First thing is count parking spaces. But that was really eagerly what I wanted to do. And as fate would have it, the parking lot got repaved just before I got the opportunity to count. So that helped with the counting process. So let's look at your parking spaces, and we'll talk about why that was the first thing I wanted to do at the church. So when you're looking at parking spaces, there's this thing called the rule of 80%, and it really works for the parking spaces or your sanctuary or really any place of business. This is going to work. It's just a psychological barrier that happens. No space consistently gets beyond 80% full. I can't say no space. We all know that restaurant that's packed every night, but typically, psychologically, there's a psychological barrier where space typically does not get filled beyond that 80% capacity. Once you start seeing a parking lot that's 80% full, it's a hassle finding a space. You're driving around. There are spaces, but it's just easier to go somewhere else where I can just pop in and grab what I need and leave. That sort of a mentality. If you're in a sanctuary that is 100% full and, we're just cheek to cheek and shoved in there, it feels a little cramped and a little uncomfortable. 80% full is, there's a little gap between us. We live in America. We like our, personal space around us. So yes, we could squeeze more people in that pew or fill all the chairs in, but we like that little gap chair or that little space between us and the pews, or just the extra space around so it doesn't feel too overcrowded. So there's an 80% barrier. So with a parking lot specifically, if they can't park in a parking lot, they can't come in and worship. So the barrier of 80% of the parking lot is our first limit that we need to recognize. Either just live into that and understand that's our number, or over the course of time, maybe we want to do some alterations or corrections or some creative parking ideas in order to increase our parking capacity. But let's stick with where we are right now. So where we are right now, parking spaces have been counted, and we have 168 parking spaces. So that's 168 parking spaces. With that, the 80% rule brings us to 134 parking spaces. So that is our parking lot at 80% capacity is 134. Sure. On Easter, will we, do max capacity? Could we have people parking on the lawn at Christmas Eve or wherever? Yes, there are those anomaly dates, but on a consistent basis, 80% full would be 134 cars parking in our parking lot because we have 168 spaces. Now, there's a national average of 1.75 to 2 people in a car going to church. That's been researched out, and you can even break it down into different regions of the country, different kinds of churches, will fluctuate. But there's your number. It's not 3 or 4, and it's not 1. It's 1.75 to 2.25 is your average capacity in a car going to church. For easy math and a nice center number, we're just going to look at the number 2. I look forward to having you come back at future videos. We're going to be talking about a lot of different stuff. We're going to break apart the church in different compartments, look at visitation, look at children's ministries, look at all kinds of different things within the life of the church, things that we can do to help achieve these numbers of growing the church and making the church a much more vital place to be able to come to and enjoy for the future. I look forward to continue making these videos, and I hope to see you soon.